Welcome to Almost Grown Up. I'm Lucy. So today I want to raise the question, what if instead of pursuing perfection, we do the complete opposite and pursue imperfection? So last month I'd given myself the freedom to use all of my spare time in creative exploration. This idea of just going into the flow and working on the craft of making things and the playfulness that comes when you just let your creativity kind of take the lead and you follow where it takes you. And I had this vision in my head for what that was going to be. And of course, the month arrives and it starts off with a bit of momentum, and then maybe by week 2, I'm sort of feeling stuck and stressed and a little bit scared about what's happening, that every time I sit down to make, it just doesn't feel like play. It feels tricky and like I'm just blocking a flow of something. And so I was walking to go and pick up my son from nursery and decided to give myself like space to voice note, because often when I don't have time to do morning pages or I don't have time to sit down and write, I will do voice note morning pages, which is, I think, a great hack if you're somebody that doesn't have a lot of time to sit. There's nothing quite like sitting down and talking to yourself, or standing, walking, talking to yourself. You know what I mean? Anyway, whilst I was talking to myself, I was trying to figure out, like, what is blocking this feeling of play? Why am I not letting myself actually play around with ideas here? Because this whole point is providing space to play around in those ideas. And the answers that kept on coming back were the fear of getting it wrong and the fear of having wasted my time. And because I had those things circling in my head, I wasn't doing anything. I was paused in place. And so I started to think about, like, okay, well, what can I do to change that? Because I don't want to spend the rest of the month in this kind of state of fear. And the question dawned on me, what if instead of trying to pursue perfection, which has been kind of my modus operandi for most of my life, I decided to pursue imperfection instead. I decided to deliberately go out to find the mistakes, deliberately go out to find things that don't work, deliberately go out to make bad art, and let that be okay. Like, have permission to try something so different that I was pretty much no guarantee and almost a guarantee the other way that I was going to get it wrong. And I use wrong in inverted commas here, as well as bad art, because that's a whole other conversation. So I decided that that was the question that I wanted to explore. And I think it feels a bit counterintuitive, especially if you kind of grown up on the internet, and like I grew up in kind of millennial peak curated influencer, everything beautiful, and sort of therefore primed to see imperfection as a flaw that needs to be changed or worked upon, rather than just part of our humanity, right? Part of what it is to be, to create, to live. And so thinking about this like pursuit of imperfection, my shoulders immediately dropped and I was like, oh, okay, this feels like roomy. This feels like something that I can relax in. And so instead of spending the month just devoted to creative exploration in general, I decided to spend the month devoted to the pursuit of imperfection. And I want to talk about a couple of the experiments I did and what I feel that I got from that. So the first thing, like I said, was this idea of deliberately making bad art. And I don't know about you, but I often sit down at a blank page or my laptop and think, oh, where do I start? There's this idea that once you have that first initial sentence down or those first initial brushes on the canvas, like that's it, you're tied into whatever this thing is going to be. You've kind of committed to it now. And the fear of getting started with that is huge. And I really wanted to liberate myself from this kind of blank page fear. And so I decided that I'm even scared about filling this sketchbook that I have with ideas, with writing, with drawings, with whatever, because it was like I was going to get it wrong, or I was going to waste the paper somehow, or, it just felt bad. And when I thought about it, it's like, okay, but that sketchbook is there to replace the making those mistakes on the canvas or making those mistakes in the kind of written page that you're going to put together. So if I can't even embrace imperfection in the practice space, then what does that look like? So I set myself a challenge of filling an entire notebook, this notebook, and I'll show you a little bit of the carnage that is inside in a second, of filling it in 10 days. And I didn't actually fill it in 10 days, but what I found is it was so liberating to just be like, okay, well, I need to fill this. So I can't second guess the stuff I'm going to do. I just need to use the pages. Like I just need to, if I think of drawing that thing, draw it. Or for example, I'm going to try and find the page. I saw this graffiti on the wall that looked like that shape. And then I was like, what does this remind me of? And it's a little bit of like, what am I going to do with that? Nothing. But it was fun and I enjoyed it and it helped, like it let me flow. And I found that there was just space to play around a lot more and it felt truly really playful. And I showed up with a notebook. I carried it everywhere. I opened it really quickly when there was a momentary pause when my son was distracted about something in a cafe, and then I sat and drew for a few minutes. And I think that just that habit of like deliberately forcing the idea of filling something quickly just unleashed this, like, it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be consistent. You show up and you turn up and you do it. And that was hugely beneficial to me. So I think if you're feeling stuck, that could be a really cool thing to try, whether it's a notebook that you're filling with ideas or writing or drawing or whatever it is that is your creative practice. Or just, you know, there was a point at which I was discussing my personal style because, that feels a whole topic that I am stuck in. And it was fun. It was fun. There was a page that I just copied the K-pop Demon Hunters like artwork because somehow I got into that, and I truly think that's a great film. Like I'm fully on board with that vibe. And it was just so freeing that it reminded me of like, oh, this is what I'm searching for. This is this kind of wave of creative energy that I need to unblock that has been stuck in a specific place as I've been trying to figure out how to create since having become a mother and having way less time. And also just giving myself permission to not be where I want to be, to not be as good as I want to be. And then the other experiment I guess I tried was as part of making this zine that I decided to make for the month, which we can come back to, it's here. I was like, okay, I need some photos for this because I wanted to explore this concept of when we look closer at something, we start to see all these flaws, right? We start to see the imperfection. It's like, if I take a quick glance at my desk, it's just a wooden desk. If I start to look at it closely, I see all of the like divots where it's been scratched, or the crayon marks, or like the coloring pencils that I kind of wish weren't on there that maybe make it a bit ugly, but also make it used and real and full of that. But my recognition was that if I looked closer, I saw the flaws. If I looked longer, I saw the beauty. Like after time, staring at those flaws, it converted into something else. I saw different shapes. I prompted different ideas in me. It made me feel a certain way. It was kind of that sense of wonder. And I wanted to go out and explore this by capturing images. And I am in no way near a trained photographer. I can barely kind of master this, like, what is it called? The triangle, exposure triangle. There you go. Don't even know the terms. So I felt like a huge imposter syndrome heading out of the house with my camera on like a Tuesday morning. You know, like people thought, I was like, what are people going to think of me? This is ridiculous. And I had so much resistance. Like I felt uncomfortable all morning. But I'm really glad I went and did it, because actually when I pep talked myself and did, this is not supposed to be perfect. You're not supposed to be good at this. You're just doing it. The point is to do it. And you don't have to take great photos. You just have to go out and take photos. And by saying to myself I was going to take at least 50 photos, I just started getting, as soon as I got out, I started snapping photos and capturing things and having that drive of like pushing quantity. One, I just got into the wave of like photographing and I kind of forgot what anybody thought about me. And two, I think I actually found some nice images because I was just pushing and pushing and pushing to make sure that I was taking enough and stopping and pausing and actually going, oh, that thing, like I'll just take a photo of it because it's caught my eye and I'll see, and maybe it'll be nothing, but maybe it will be something. And that freedom again to just allow myself to play and explore was just great. And I think the kind of device there that worked was this quantity thing. And I guess in some ways it's the same as the notebook, because if you're pursuing the imperfection, we're not worried about how good it is. We're just worried about getting things out, about kind of clearing those pipes, about getting perspective and capturing things. The more I looked and embraced this idea, the more I kind of saw the beauty in the imperfection, in the flaws. And of course, that brought me to this philosophy of wabi-sabi, which I kept on kind of coming back to throughout the month. And if you don't know what wabi-sabi is, it's a Japanese philosophy. Sorry, I've pronounced it in a very Western way there. But wabi means simplicity, finding beauty in modest, imperfect, humble things. And sabi is a word that means the beauty that comes with time or age or wear or the kind of patina on something. So putting those two things together, you get this sense of a beauty in the exploration or the appreciation of an object or thing for its wear, for its use, for its just imperfection that has either come over time or is just part of the design of it having been handmade or crafted or built by a human. And I watched a brilliant video on YouTube. I'll include a clip now from Titania Hopper's channel on the wabi-sabi of photography. And this kind of really inspired me to think, okay, what would it look like to chase this own imperfection in my work, this own sense of happy accidents, and also opening up to the question that my planning might not always know what's best. My goal of what the perfect would be might not always be what the best thing is, might not be the artwork that I really want to make. It might just be the idea that's in my head. And actually, when I give myself the space to just make it and embrace the imperfections and the flaws and the happy accidents on the way, I might make something that's different to what I expected, but that I love. And that was a really nice thought, that actually imperfection isn't necessarily bad, and setting it up against perfection and assuming therefore if it's imperfect it's flawed or bad or we shouldn't want it. It was interesting to start to question, like, what if we should want it? What if it actually will bring us the desired outcome? What is there in that imperfection that gives us this beauty of humanness, of this flawedness, and that there's more there somehow because it's imperfect? That, I think, gives us permission to embrace this idea that we might not always have the right answer. The plan might not always be the right plan, and kind of embracing where it goes off course could be the very thing that we need to discover the next thing, to move on to the thing that we're trying to build or take us in the direction that we want to go. And one of the concepts that I was reading wabi-sabi for designers, philosophers, and artists by, I think it's David Coren. And a lot of what he talks about is this idea of the cycle of when does something start and when does something finish. And in wabi-sabi, there's this idea of, well, let me get the quote because it is really good. Here. Leonard Cohen, that's who wrote this. Things wabi-sabi have a vague, blurry, or attenuated quality, as things do as they approach nothingness or come out of it. And this blurriness, this idea of you don't know when something starts and when something finishes, like when is something truly ever done? It made me think a little bit about that concept I talk about in the last episode of rotting, and the idea of what the rot feeds, what it brings into our work, because we've let it kind of go down, and where it feeds, and because it goes back into the earth and then it feeds the next thing that's coming. And it hit on me that actually all of these ideas, this zine included, that I decide to make, I don't know where that's going to go. Like, it might not go anywhere, but just be fertile soil or help me create fertile soil for the next project. And that embracing of the idea of, like, it's all cyclical, it's all moving around, and it is blurry as it comes into life and blurry as it fades from it, and feeling the need to plan that and know a concrete thing traps us in a state that just isn't possible, especially I think with creative work, because knowing when something's done is fair enough. You like knowing where the end of a piece is, knowing where the full stop is, knowing, for example, in this podcast, when to stop talking. There's something in that, but also that doesn't mean that's the end of this podcast. That doesn't mean that's the end of the piece of writing. That's maybe that piece of writing, maybe that podcast goes in to feed something else, and that we leave a thread hanging, right, to pull on for the next thread. And this month I've also been exploring Art and Fear, which is a book by David Bales and Ted Orland. And one of the things they talk about is that your previous work always has threads for the next work, or at least if you want to keep on making, leave yourself those threads to explore in the next work. Because if you wrap everything up, are you done? And I think that's what this embracing of imperfection does. And especially what I took away from the wabi-sabi philosophy is that I'm never going to be done. In my head, I have this idea of arriving at a point where I have created this creative career that I want, where I have become this mother that I really want to be to my child, where I feel like I am the person that I want to show up as every single day. And it looks a certain way in my head. But that is never going to arrive, because even if I did get there, the goalposts would have been moved. There would be a new thing that I wanted to be, or a new part that I wanted to embrace, or, you know, the writing I'm doing now is definitely better than the writing I was doing 2, 5, 10 years ago, but it's still not where I want it to be, you know? And I would imagine even if in 5, 10 years time, I'm way better than I am now, I'll probably still feel like, okay, I'm not where I want to be yet. And I found peace in that idea a bit. I think it's a challenge, and I think I'm figuring it out, but the fact that nothing is going to ever be perfect or finished, that instead it's just going to be what it's going to be, really helped make me feel like I had permission to play a lot more, because what was I going to ruin by playing? And the other thing I wanted to talk about with this blurriness was this idea of not really knowing where things come out of and where things go, but the space that we provide between them is how they somehow come to life. And I took my son to the Museum of Music here recently, and there was a quote on one of the walls basically describing music, and they described it as a combination of sound and silences in the course of time. Without the specific space, it's lost. And it hit me, that idea that, oh, okay, music only is music. A piece of music is only a piece of music. We can only hear that sound because we've heard the silence before and the same afterwards, and the notes in between. If they were all played in one go, we'd hear it differently. It wouldn't be a tune. It wouldn't be a melody in the same way. And I never really thought about that before, that music only exists because of the silence. But given the current space I'm in, it helped me to reflect that actually most of the creative work that I am doing, or that we are doing, comes from allowing that creative space of not knowing, allowing that silence of all that possibility to be. And then we can play that first note and see what happens after we play it. And if we don't like it, if it doesn't end up where we want to be, we pause, we sit in the silence, and we start again. And it dawned on me that actually in my practice, moving from planning days kind of like hour by hour to having a rough guide and just following where it took me, it meant that I ended up writing poetry for the scene in a way that I had not thought I would write poetry. I'm not a poet. At least, I mean, you can read it and you can tell me if you think I'm a poet or not. But it didn't feel like that was a medium that I feel in any way confident with writing. But that's what came out. Those are the words that came out in the way that it came out. And it was beautiful to be able to sit and self-express like that. And it only came because I wasn't planning, because I allowed the space to do it. And the same I realized for most days, I let myself kind of lie down for about 20 minutes to have a mini power nap, I guess, before I pick up my son, to just be like, oof, reset, try and get a little bit of energy, because 2-year-olds require a lot of energy. They are wonderful, 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 wonderful human beings, but oof, they're tiring. And I realized I wasn't sleeping in this time, but actually I was having some of my best creative ideas because I'd let my brain stop all this doing and just created some silence in which to explore. And I think if we're not pursuing the perfection and the timeline of needing things to be done in a certain way at a certain time, we offer ourselves that space, then the permission to see what comes out of it rather than needing to know. And there is a quote from the Leonard Cohen book that I really loved, which was pare it down to the essence, but don't remove the poetry. And I don't know where I want to take that or what I think of it yet, really, but there's a part of me that feels like that could be a way to approach life. There's something in simplicity there, definitely. And also just a celebration of the essence of the thing. And I feel really happy that after 2 weeks of work, I made a whole zine. It's here. I'll show it to you differently. But that it's not perfect. In fact, look here, there is a typo in the pursuit. Like, what? How did I make a typo on the front page of the zine? But I did. But that doesn't mean it's not here. It's still here. It still happened. And I don't think it would have happened if I hadn't been chasing that imperfection. Which, while we're on it, makes me think of perhaps we could view our imperfection as a little bit of a superpower, because you know this wasn't made by AI, because I've made a spelling mistake on the front page. And in an AI generated world, our imperfections show our humanity, our flaws show us as real people, having done that writing, having done that drawing, having, made that thing. And I think that's what we want to see. We want to be able to feel reassured that somebody put the time in to make it. And if we're going to spend our time consuming it, there was thought in there, and actually these feelings and thoughts are coming from another human being. Just giving ourselves that freedom to say our flaws are, one, could potentially be a superpower, but two, they just show our humanity in general. And I talk in the zine, there's an article about being an imperfect parent, because I think there is such a burden nowadays to be a perfect parent. And I've definitely struggled with the idea of what does it look and feel like to get it wrong when it's something you really care about and someone that you want to give the absolute best experience of life to, but ultimately you're going to get it wrong because you've never done it before, because you're tired that day, because you don't know how to do that thing, because you haven't figured out that it's triggering that other thing in you. Like, there's so many reasons that you're not going to show up perfectly, but that maybe that would be such a burden to have a perfect parent. And embracing the imperfection as part of our humanness, the flaws show us to be human, and therefore a way in which we connect with other people, because that is something that is true and core to all of us, that we will get things wrong, that we will do things imperfectly, and it's a way in which we connect. And if we just let it be imperfect, where will the poetry in life come from? There's a great article on Substack about poetry watching, and I will include it here, but this idea that you can sit and watch the world go by and find moments of poetry in it. And that only comes when we sit and look. That only comes when we celebrate the imperfection of being human. And also those moments where it all feels perfect for a second, which is insane, because how is that even possible, that we have those moments that just are beautiful all in that one thing? So I hope that we can sit and find more poetry in the world. I hope that we can give ourselves more permission to be imperfect and be messy and not follow the plan and just see what happens, and give ourselves permission to make the bad art, to turn up imperfectly, to try our best, and then see where we go from there. Like I said, I spent the 2 weeks making this zine, which is like 14 pages, I think, called The Pursuit of Imperfection, and it talks about art and making art. It is some art on the reflection of making bad art, on this idea of how we look closer and how we look longer, and this idea of how we embrace imperfection in parenting. So if you want a copy, you can get a digital one on my website for free, or you can drop me a message, and if you're happy to pay for postage, I will send you one in the post for free, obviously. And what's been super exciting about it is it's not perfect, but it's something that I made, and I am excited to see what little threads in this, I mean, there's literally a thread dangling down, will go into something else. So my question, I guess, to you is, what would it look like for you to chase imperfection this week? What threads have you left dangling that you could pull on and go and explore? If you were making something badly, what would you go and make? If you had permission to get it wrong, what would you go and try? And where maybe can you find some beauty in something that is imperfect, including yourself? Just that reminder that it doesn't just go for objects. There's something embracing the beauty in our own imperfection. I would love to hear what you think on this. Do you think the pursuit of imperfection is a way to move forward? And have you tried it in your creative practice? I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching and for listening. I love to explore these topics with you, and I would love to hear what you think. I will be back soon, but in the meantime, happy growing. First tea, always tea. And again, and I have 30 minutes, so it better be good. Okay, shadow side of my face, but that's okay because everybody has a shadow side. Right, what are we doing? We're recording a podcast. That's what we're doing.